When we talk about aging, we often picture silver hair, soft smiles, and the gentle wisdom that comes with time. But inside the body, another story unfolds, quieter, slower, and often unnoticed until one day it makes itself known. This story begins in the bones. For most of our lives, our bones feel strong without demanding much attention. They support us when we walk, lift, stretch, and reach. They hold us upright through the chapters of raising families, building careers, and finding our place in the world. But after the age of 60, something subtle begins to shift. Bones, despite appearing solid and unmoving, are actually alive, constantly rebuilding, repairing, and reshaping themselves. Inside every bone is a bustling world of cells working day and night. Some cells build new bone, others break down old bone. And when these two processes stay in balance, the skeleton remains strong. Yet, with age, that balance quietly changes. Imagine a small town where builders retire faster than new ones arrive. Renovations slow. Cracks stay a little longer. Old structures weaken just a little at a time. That's what happens in the bones after 60. The cells that build bone, called osteoblasts, begin to work more slowly. Meanwhile, the cells that break down bone, osteoclasts, continue at their usual pace. Over the years, this small shift becomes a widening gap. At first, no one feels it. There's no pain, no sound, no warning sign. But deep inside, bone density begins to diminish. Microscopic holes appear in the internal structure, tiny spaces that quietly weaken the bone's foundation. This is how bones become more fragile, more likely to bend or break under stresses they once handled with ease. For many people, this change becomes noticeable only when something unexpected happens. A small fall that leads to a bigger injury, or a sudden ache in the hip or back that wasn't there before. But aging alone is not the whole story. Hormones, especially estrogen in women and testosterone in men, play a powerful role in maintaining bone strength. After menopause, women experience a sharp decline in estrogen, leading to accelerated bone loss. Men also lose testosterone gradually with age, contributing to weaker bones, though often at a slower pace. Lifestyle, diet, medical history, and genetics all join the conversation too. Years of low calcium intake, limited sunlight, long periods of sitting, or certain medications may quietly add their influence over time. But one thing is important to understand. Bone loss is not a failure. It's not a sign that you've done something wrong. It's a natural biological process, one that every person faces, written into the very design of human aging. Still, knowledge gives power, and understanding how bones change after 60 opens a door to what we can do. Steps that strengthen, protect, and preserve the body's foundation. In the chapters ahead, we'll explore the science behind this transformation, why bones thin, how fractures happen, and what daily habits can keep your skeleton resilient for years to come. Because even though the story of bone loss begins quietly, we have the ability to shape how it unfolds.
Part 2. Inside the Architecture of Aging Bones. To understand why bones become fragile after 60, it helps to imagine what a bone truly looks like on the inside. Most people picture bone as a solid block, stiff, dense, unchanging. But the truth is far more remarkable. Bone is a living masterpiece of architecture. If you could hold the bone under a microscope, you'd see a landscape that looks almost like a coral reef. Strong, beautifully patterned, and full of tiny bridges and beams woven together. These structures, called trabeculae, form the inner scaffolding that gives bones their strength. In youth, these trabeculae are thick, interlocked, and tightly connected. Each beam reinforces the next, spreading weight and absorbing impact with ease. When you run, climb stairs, or lift something heavy, your bones respond like a well-engineered bridge, stable and resilient. But over the decades, the picture slowly changes. After 60, the inner scaffolding begins to thin. Some of the tiny bridges shrink. Some disappear altogether. And as more trabeculae are lost, the inner framework becomes less like a sturdy structure and more like a delicate one, still functioning, but with less safety margin. This gradual thinning is one of the key reasons fractures become more likely even with minor falls or sudden twists. But why does this happen? Every bone is home to two teams constantly working in opposition, like gardeners tending a living landscape. Osteoclasts, the removers. They break down old or damaged bone, making space for renewal. Osteoblasts, the builders. They lay down fresh bone, filling in the gaps and strengthening the framework. For most of our lives, these two forces stay in harmony. Remove a little, rebuild a little. It's the body's way of keeping bones repaired and responsive. But by the time we reach 60, that balance shifts. The osteoclasts continue clearing out old bone at a steady pace, but the osteoblasts, the builders, slow down. They produce less new bone, and the quality of that new bone becomes lower. It's still functional, but not as dense, not as connected, not as strong as before. Think of it like replacing thick support beams with thinner ones. The structure still stands, but it's easier to damage. And this is where hormones enter the story again. Estrogen and testosterone act like foremen managing the construction crew. When levels drop, especially the sudden decline of estrogen after menopause, the builders lose direction. They slow down. They leave more space unfilled. This is why women often see significant bone loss in the years after menopause, and why osteoporosis is more common in women than men. But both men and women experience a gradual loss of bone-building hormones as they age. Even with a slower decline, the impact adds up. Beyond hormones, other factors quietly influence the bone's architecture over the years. Low physical activity leads to weaker bone signals, telling the body, we don't need as much strength here. Lack of vitamin D reduces the body's ability to absorb calcium effectively. Dietary gaps in calcium, magnesium, and protein weaken the foundation. Smoking and excessive alcohol accelerate bone breakdown. Certain medications, like long-term steroids, thin bones faster. Family genetics set the baseline for bone strength. Some people lose bone more quickly simply because it runs in their family. All these forces shape the inner landscape of the skeleton over the years. But here's something reassuring. Bone loss is not a sudden collapse. It's gradual, incredibly gradual, unfolding over years and decades. That means there is time. Time to strengthen, time to protect, time to make meaningful changes no matter your age. In the next part, We'll explore the moment when weakened bones meet everyday life, and why the smallest falls after 60 can result in injuries that seem far too severe for such simple accidents.
Part 3. When fragile bones meet everyday life. Most people over 60 can remember a time when falling was simply falling. You stumbled, brushed yourself off, maybe laughed a little, and kept moving. But with age, something changes. Not in your spirit, but in your bones. As the inner structure becomes thinner and weaker, everyday life begins to carry risks that once felt insignificant. A step missed on the porch, a slippery spot in the kitchen, a small misstep while gardening. These ordinary moments can suddenly lead to injuries that seem far out of proportion to the fall itself. Why does such a small accident cause so much damage? To understand this, imagine a tree branch. A young branch bends easily, flexible, resilient. But an older, dried branch snaps with just a bit of pressure. Bones work the same way. When they lose density and their internal scaffolding weakens, they lose flexibility too. Instead of bending slightly under pressure, they are more likely to crack or break. But there's another element at play: reflexes and balance. Throughout life, the body relies on strong muscles, quick reaction time, and sharp balance to prevent falls. As we age, these systems naturally slow. Reaction time becomes a bit delayed, balance becomes more uncertain, muscles lose some strength, vision changes make depth perception trickier. A fall that would have been prevented at 40 might not be avoidable at 70. And when you combine even a small fall with more fragile bones, fractures become far more likely. Some bones are particularly vulnerable. The wrist. People instinctively reach out with their hands during a fall. A weakened wrist bone may not withstand the impact. The spine. Tiny vertebrae can compress under pressure, leading to back pain, height loss, or a hunched posture many seniors recognize. The hip. Perhaps the most serious fracture, one that can profoundly affect mobility, independence, and overall health. Hip fractures in particular are often misunderstood. It's not just the fall that causes the break. In many cases, the bone is already so weakened that it can fracture even before the body hits the ground, causing the fall itself. The fracture comes first, the fall comes second. This is why hip protection and fall prevention become so important after 60. But here's the reassuring truth. Fragile bones do not mean a fragile life. The goal is not to live in fear, but to understand how the body changes and what steps can keep you safe. Interestingly, many people don't realize they have weakened bones until a fracture occurs. Bone loss is often called a silent condition because it gives no early warning signs. The bones weaken quietly, without pain or discomfort. But the moment a fracture happens, it becomes a turning point, a moment that often motivates people to take bone health seriously for the first time. And that's where awareness becomes power. By understanding how fractures occur, why they happen, and what parts of life pose the highest risks, people over 60 can take practical steps to protect themselves. Simple changes: better lighting at home, rugs secured to the floor, grab bars in the bathroom, stronger leg muscles, vitamin D support can drastically reduce the likelihood of falls and fractures. Because the story of bone health isn't just about biology, it's also about environment, habits, and awareness. In the next section, we'll walk through the deeper science of bone loss, the chemical signals, the hormonal shifts,
and the subtle biological changes that quietly reshape the skeleton after 60. Understanding these changes helps you see bone health not as fate, but as a process we can influence in meaningful ways.
Part 4. The hidden biology behind bone loss. Behind every change in the body after 60, there is a quiet biological story unfolding, one shaped by hormones, nutrients, and the way our cells communicate with each other. Bone loss is no exception. In fact, it is one of the most biologically complex processes of aging, involving a finely tuned system that slowly shifts out of balance over time. Let's take a gentle walk through that biology. At the center of it all is calcium, the mineral that gives bones their hardness and resilience. Think of calcium as the bricks in a sturdy wall. But to stay strong, the body needs not only the bricks, but also the workers, the tools, and the instructions to place those bricks correctly. For most of life, calcium comes and goes through a well-regulated cycle. The intestines absorb it from food. The kidneys filter extra amounts. And the bones store and release calcium as needed. But after 60, that balance begins to shift. One major reason is vitamin D, a hormone-like nutrient that helps the body absorb calcium from food. As we age, the skin becomes less efficient at producing vitamin D from sunlight. Kidneys also become less effective at converting vitamin D into its active form. So even if someone eats enough calcium, the body may not absorb it the way it once did. Without enough active vitamin D, the body draws more calcium out of the bones to keep blood calcium levels stable, weakening the skeleton from within. Another player is parathyroid hormone, often called PTH. This hormone helps regulate calcium in the blood. When calcium levels drop, PTH rises, signaling the body to dissolve some bone and release calcium into circulation. It's a normal process until it becomes too frequent. With age, especially when vitamin D is low, PTH tends to stay elevated. This leads to more bone breakdown than bone building. And then there are the hormones that act as the body's construction managers, estrogen and testosterone. Estrogen supports the activity of osteoblasts, the bone-building cells, and keeps osteoclasts, the bone-removing cells, from becoming too aggressive. This is why the sharp drop in estrogen after menopause leads to rapid bone loss in women. It's not just a small change. Bone can decline by up to 10% in the first few years after menopause. Men lose testosterone more slowly, but its decline still impacts bone-building power. Low testosterone can lead to loss of muscle mass, reduced mobility, and an overall decrease in bone strength.
Together, these hormonal shifts reshape the internal architecture of the skeleton. The trabeculi, those tiny bone beams, thin out. Connections between them weaken. The outer shell of bone becomes less dense, and fractures become more likely. But biology doesn't work alone. Lifestyle quietly influences bone loss every single day. A diet low in protein. Protein makes up about half of the bone's structure, the part that gives flexibility. Without enough protein, bones become more brittle. Chronic inflammation. Conditions like arthritis, diabetes, or long-term stress elevate inflammatory markers that can speed up bone breakdown. Medications. Long-term steroid use, certain acid reflux medications, and some seizure drugs can all affect bone density. Reduced physical stress on the skeleton. Bones strengthen when they feel pressure from walking, lifting, climbing stairs, or resistance exercises. Without this stimulation, the body senses that bone strength is not needed and gradually reduces it. All of these factors, hormones, aging organs, nutrient absorption, inflammation, and lifestyle, come together like pieces of a puzzle. Each piece influences the rest, shaping the story of bone loss after 60. But there is something incredibly hopeful in understanding this biology. If bone loss is influenced by many factors, it can also be improved by many factors. In the final part, we'll explore the practical steps, movement, nutrition, daily habits, and medical support that can help protect and rebuild bone strength even later in life. Because while aging is natural, fragility is not inevitable.
Part 5. Strengthening the story. What you can do after 60. After understanding how bones change, weaken, and respond to aging, one truth becomes clear. Bone loss may be part of the human story, but how we live with it and protect ourselves from it is a story we get to write. And it begins with simple, gentle steps. One of the most powerful tools is movement. Bones respond to motion the way plants respond to sunlight. They grow stronger with it. Every time your foot meets the ground on a walk, every time your leg lifts you from a chair, every time your arms push or pull against light resistance, your bones receive a clear message. Stay strong. We still need you. You don't need heavy weights or intense workouts. Walking, stair climbing, gentle resistance bands, light dumbbells, Tai Chi, water exercise, all of these stimulate the skeleton in their own quiet, effective ways. Even 10 minutes added to your routine can make a meaningful difference. Another essential piece of the puzzle is muscle strength. Muscles act like the body's shock absorbers. They protect the bones when you move, help you stay balanced, and reduce the chances of falling. After 60, maintaining muscle becomes just as important as maintaining bone. Food also plays a deeply important role. Calcium. The body needs it to maintain bone structure, yet many adults don't get enough. Foods like yogurt, fortified plant milks, leafy greens, almonds, and canned sardines with soft bones help meet the daily need. Vitamin D. This is the key that unlocks calcium absorption. But because aging skin makes less vitamin D and older kidneys activate less of it, many adults require supplements recommended by a doctor to reach a healthy level. Protein. Half of bone is made of protein, and older adults often eat too little of it. Eggs, fish, poultry, beans, tofu, and dairy products help strengthen bones and muscles together. Magnesium, vitamin K2, and omega-3s. These nutrients support bone remodeling, mineral balance, and inflammation control. And then there is fall prevention, not as a limitation, but as an act of protection. Small adjustments can dramatically reduce risk. Good lighting in hallways and bathrooms, non-slip mats in the kitchen and shower, secure rugs or remove them entirely, handrails on stairs, grab bars where needed, a clutter-free walking path in every room, shoes with good grip, vision checkups to improve depth perception, Each improvement creates an environment that supports independence, confidence, and safety. Medical care is another powerful ally. A bone density scan, often recommended for adults over 65, can give a clear picture of your bone health long before a fracture ever happens. If osteoporosis or significant bone loss is found, doctors may prescribe medications that slow bone breakdown, boost bone building, or do both. These treatments can dramatically reduce fracture risk. But perhaps the most important message is this: it is never too late to protect your bones. Even in your 60s, 70s, 80s, and beyond, bones can respond to care. They can strengthen, they can stabilize, and they can support you in doing the things you love: walking through the neighborhood, visiting family, gardening, cooking, traveling, laughing, living. Bone loss is part of aging, yes, but fragility is not destiny. You carry decades of resilience, strength, and experience. Your bones have supported you through a lifetime of moments, big and small. And with the right steps, they can continue to support you for years to come. Aging is not simply losing strength. It's learning how to protect it. It's understanding your body more deeply. It's choosing habits that honor the life you still want to live. And perhaps most of all, it's remembering that every chapter, including this one, holds the potential for growth, stability, and renewed strength.